Hi, and welcome to the Shroud of Turin exhibit. Today you're going to learn about the most studied archaeological artifact in the history of the world. This exhibit is being brought to you by the Bible Seminary, Grace Fellowship, and the Christian Thinkers Society. What is the Shroud of Turin? It is a 14-foot by 4-foot piece of linen sewn from flax in the ancient world. Many people believe that it was the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. If so, this is a really important study. The Shroud of Turin is marked with all the things that you would expect a crucifixion victim to have experienced, from the top of this victim's head to the bottom of his feet. About 5 feet 11 inches, we will be able to see the wounds inflicted as recorded in the Gospels on Jesus Christ of Nazareth. The Shroud of Turin has gone through an incredible history, as you might imagine. We don't have many shrouds to use as parallels because in late Second Temple period Judaism, after 1 year, the bones were collected and reburied in ossuaries and the shrouds were discarded. We only have one example from Jerusalem in a tomb that was a leper's tomb, and so no one entered that tomb, and so we can actually see the first century shroud there. That, along with the Shroud of Turin, are the only two that we have at this point. But as we continue to excavate more, I would assume that we will find more evidence of this as well. The Shroud of Turin moves throughout Europe over a period of hundreds of years as it leaves Jerusalem, and we are able to trace its route through the pollen on the shroud. Most interestingly, some of the pollen on the shroud only exist in the Jerusalem-Jericho region. That pollen can be identified. This is very important because in the ancient world, they had no concept of what pollen was, even in the Middle Ages. And so there's no way that a forger in the Middle Ages would have been able to collect pollen and sprinkle it on the shroud, say from the Jerusalem area, or the other areas that it went, for example, Constantinople and ultimately into Italy. Scientists today can track that pollen along with the limestone particles on the shroud, which have unique chemical signatures to the Jerusalem area, and evidence, in fact, that this was once in a Jerusalem area tomb. The weave on the Shroud of Turin is what we call a herringbone weave or a Z-pattern twill. We have never found another garment with this exact type of twill on it. In fact, it's a very expensive garment, which is what the Bible says, that Joseph of Arimathea was a very wealthy man. And he, in fact, purchased the nicest and most expensive garment that he could for the burial of his Savior. When we look at the Shroud of Turin, we see a number of fascinating things. For example, the blood spatter on the shroud. One of the things that catches our eyes as researchers is the blood is still red when scientifically it should have turned dark brown or black. There's only one explanation for this scientifically. So there is a high level of bilirubin, which is a complication or a result of torture. We see this in modern forensic evidence. When a person has undergone torture and the liver is excreting and the red blood cells are breaking down, there is an elevated level of creatinine and bilirubin, which prevents the blood from turning black. Even after all of these years, when you see the Shroud of Turin, you're still going to be looking at red blood, a reminder that the person wrapped in this shroud was indeed tortured. You'll be able to see the markings on the hands and the markings on the feet. In medieval art, we always see a wound through the palm of Jesus' hand. In fact, we now know that's not how it happened. We know this because we have multiple examples of crucifixion victims from the first century with nails still in them. The nails, in fact, went through the radius and the ulna, or between what we call Destats space right here in the wrist. That is consistent with what we see on the Shroud of Turin, and in fact, not what a medieval forger would have used. The heels are where the man in the shroud is nailed from the outside in. So the beam is between the feet of the victim, and through the calcaneus, this spongy bone in the heel, the nails enter, and a washer is often used to pin the foot against the cross and to keep this person from writhing and detaching himself from the cross. That's not how it's depicted in medieval art either. You always see in medieval art, the feet are overlapped and the victim is nailed through the dorsum of the feet. So we now know that the nails are from the outside in. On the hands, they are through the wrist area, and sometimes there were even ancillary nails that were used in the hands. And as horrific as it may sound, Jesus of Nazareth, after his beating, is completely nude as he is hanging on the cross. And we have multiple ancient sources that refer to nails being driven through the pelvic region of the person on the cross. The purpose of crucifixion from the Roman standpoint is shame and humiliation. They want to keep this person on the cross as long as they can to send a public message that you better not get sideways with Rome. Now, very interestingly, as time passes and Constantine makes crucifixion illegal in the Roman Empire after his conversion to Christianity in 313, we begin to see images of Jesus emerge, and we have coins with his image on them and paintings. Very interestingly, those images match closely the image that we see of the man in the shroud. But the first hard evidence that we have of the Shroud of Turin in history comes to us from what's called the Hungarian Prayer Codex. And in the 12th century, the Hungarian Prayer Codex depicts in a painted, illuminated form Jesus being removed from the cross and wrapped in a shroud. The shroud is that herringbone pattern. And so we know for sure that the people who have created this Hungarian Prayer Codex have seen the actual Shroud of Turin, because it's the exact same pattern that we have no other corollaries of. So we see the shroud coming on public display for the first time in the 14th century. And from there on, we have an unbroken record of its provenance. Sadly, it was almost destroyed several times in fires, and you'll actually be able to see the burn marks on the shroud and the horror of it almost being destroyed. Now, this is important because once something is in a fire, it is no longer a good candidate for radiocarbon dating. In 1988, the radiocarbon dates that were done on the Shroud of Turin came back saying that it was a medieval artifact, but there were a couple of big problems, and dozens of peer-reviewed studies since then that have disproven these original findings in 1988. The first problem is the fact that it was in a fire. I am a scientist. I do radiocarbon dating all the time, but I would never radiocarbon date a textile that had been in a fire because it absorbs the smoke from that time, and that's what we end up dating, not the original date of the fabric or of the fiber. But secondly, it was patched, and the sisters patched the outside of the shroud as after it was in a fire, and the threads that were pulled from the patches ended up being used in the radiocarbon dating. In other words, we were dating medieval cotton, which we now know. We have this after the British Museum was forced by a lawsuit to turn over the actual material that they tested, and you could see cotton fibers in there. And of course, this is very clear evidence that this was the thread that was used. We ended up testing the thread and not the original fabric. All the other science is rock solid, supporting the authenticity of the dating of the Shroud of Turin to the 1st century. Just 3 years ago, we have a new test that was done called WAXX, W-A-X-X, Wide Angle X-ray Scattering. And with this new technology, we can date the degradation of the fibers at a predictable rate. The Shroud of Turin, along with dozens of other fabrics, one being from the 1st century, Masada in particular, that we know is AD 1st century. Every single fabric that was tested dated spot on to what the scientists knew in advance that it was in this double-blind study. So the science is sound, the Shroud of Turin is ancient, it dates to the 1st century AD, and it matches the wounds of Jesus of Nazareth. The modern study of the Shroud of Turin begins with Segundo Pia, a lawyer who was an amateur photographer. When Segundo Pia photographed the Shroud of Turin for the first time, we realized that it was a negative image. It was actually the inside of the shroud that had the image imprinted on it when the resurrection occurred. It's only through photography that we can see it as a positive image. The pictures that Segunda Pia took in 1898 enable us to see things that we cannot see today. For example, the Shroud of Turin research project in the 1970s, some of their photographs were not as good because of degradation on the shroud that had occurred in the meantime. Now, it's no longer degrading. It's in St. John the Baptist Church, it's protected, it's in a climate-controlled environment. But in those original photographs, we can even see coins in the eye socket of the man on the shroud, and if you look carefully at Segunda Pia's photos, you can actually see the coins of Pontius Pilate in the eye sockets of the man in the shroud. The Shroud of Turin research project did a fantastic job in the 1970s of studying this artifact and making their evidence known to the world. The photos of Barry Schwartz are what you're going to be seeing throughout the exhibit today, and Barry became a believer in the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin, even though he set out to disprove it based on the things that he photographed. Now, the actual image on the shroud is just a filament on the surface of the fiber. We measure these things in macrons, like your bed sheet we could measure and say that the average sheet is 350 macrons in depth. Same thing with the Shroud of Turin, about 350 macrons in depth. 0.2 macrons have the image of the shroud. It is a filament on the surface. We do not have modern technology that can replicate this, and it's been attempted at Los Alamos, it's been attempted at NASA. No one can replicate this. If you put blood on a fiber, it soaks all the way through. If you put any type of ink or ointment on a fiber, it sinks all the way through. But on the Shroud of Turin, the image is only on the very top 0.2 macrons, showing that something inexplicable has happened inside a tomb in Jerusalem in the 1st century. The blood on the Shroud of Turin is type AB blood, which is a very rare blood type. And as I said, it has not turned dark brown or black, it's still red. And when you see this blood, you'll see it in all the places that you would expect to. The wound between the 4th and 5th rib on the right side, between the heels or on the outside of the heels, in the wrist area, around the head, and then 700 wounds from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet mark the man in the shroud. The reason for this is a Roman flagrum, a whip with multiple strands, has been used for the whipping of this person. And again, pointing to Jesus of Nazareth, because not all crucifixion victims were scourged. But the flagrum itself not only hits the back of the head and exposes the ribs, the buttocks, the back of the legs, all the way down to the heels, but it wraps around the body and it destroys everything on the front as well, including the genitalia. It is truly a horrific scene. 700 wounds. No wonder Jesus of Nazareth stumbled while carrying the patibulum of the cross to Calvary. It's not that Jesus was weak, believe me, he wasn't. But this scourging would have killed most men, and by this point, he has been hit multiple times in the face with fists, according to the Gospels. He's been slapped in the face multiple times. He's been hit over the head with rods multiple times. He is dehydrated, he is in shock, and he is concussed. And we haven't even begun the crucifixion process at this point. Now, the shroud itself tells the story. 14 feet by 4 feet approximately, and as we study from top to bottom, we see the greatest story ever told, the greatest expression of love ever given. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus didn't have to do it. He told Pontius Pilate, no one's taking my life from me, I'm laying it down. And so in this greatest act of love, on Friday of Passover week in the spring of AD 33, Jesus Christ lays down his life. Importantly, Jesus is crowned with a crown of thorns. Now, we many times assume with a Western mind that this is sort of a wreath of thorns. In fact, it is a helmet of thorns. This helmet of thorns with these deep Judean Bethlehem area thorns covers the entire scalp, has dozens of wounds from this crown of thorns, and they are like being pierced with a nail. So the crown of thorns goes on his head, and the symbolism is important because the earth began to bring forth thorns after the fall in the Garden of Eden. And so the thorns then become a symbol of the curse on humanity. Jesus then takes upon him the crown of thorns, symbolizing that in this act, he is removing the curse from humanity. So from the top of his head, the crowns, to the Genesis 3:15, that his heels would be struck by the serpent. And this is exactly what happens. When he is nailed through the heel, he is being struck by the serpent, but in the process, Genesis 3:15, he crushes the serpent's head, breaking Satan's dominion over mankind. Now, Jesus walks the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. And as he's walking this, he has over 700 wounds on his body. He is barely recognizable. He's carrying the patibulum, the horizontal beam of the cross, which weighs about 125 pounds. He stumbles on the way, and he's helped by a man named Simon of Cyrene. Simon of Cyrene is a known historical character. His ossuary was on display in the Houston Museum of Natural Science a few years ago, a real person. And this reminds us that when we're reading the gospel accounts, we're talking about real people, real places, and real events. Now, the act of crucifixion itself is common. It happens every day in the Roman Empire, but the Romans don't normally crucify on a Shabbat because they're going to have to get people down by sundown on Friday, and certainly not on a high Shabbat like before Passover. In the case of Jesus, the religious authorities are eager to get him out of the way. They convince the Roman authorities to nail him to the cross at 9 in the morning. 9 in the morning matters because that's the time of the morning sacrifice according to the Bible. Joseph Caiaphas is standing in the temple at 9 in the morning, slaughtering the Passover lamb at the very moment that Jesus is nailed to the cross. He hangs there for 6 hours until 3 in the afternoon. That's the time of the evening sacrifice. We tend to call that afternoon, but they called it evening. So as Jesus takes his last breath, the Passover lamb is being slaughtered again for the evening sacrifice. Jesus has a thief on one side of him and a thief on the other side of him. One of them says that he'll be with him in paradise. The Romans have to get this thing over because they've got to get these guys buried by about 5:30 in the afternoon when the sun goes down. It's already 3 o'clock. So they come with the intent of breaking the legs of these 3 victims. They go to the men on the left and right of Jesus and they snap their legs. Imagine the brute force that it takes to snap a man's tibia and fibula. We have a crucifixion victim in Jerusalem, excavated in 1968, named Yehohanan. His name was on his ossuary, and his legs were snapped, called crucifixion, just like the gospel said, and he still had a nail through his heel, just like we might imagine, and wounds through the radius at ulna. Crucified under Pontius Pilate, he may even be one of the thieves on the cross. But when they came to Jesus, he was already dead, having endured so much more than the others, and so not a bone of his body was broken, just as the gospel said. So Jesus is buried. There is some initial cleaning of his body is done, and perhaps even some initial anointing that is done. He is wrapped in a shroud. The word orthonia, as used in the Gospel of John, refers to the entire assemblage of burial garments. It's comprised of a sindon, which is the actual shroud, and then you have a separate headpiece, what's called a sudaria, and then the kereia, which are the wrappings or the straps around the body, like you see in the story of Lazarus, that they had wrapped him, but Lazarus was still able to walk. So this keeps the body, the limbs from hanging down, and the headpiece not only covers over the shroud, covers the face, but it actually ties the mouth shut as well so that this person's mouth is not gaping, something to which Second Temple period Jews were sensitive. So Jesus goes into the grave before 5:30 on Friday afternoon. He is in the tomb all day Saturday, and on Sunday morning, he rises from the dead. Altogether, about 39 hours in the grave. And when Jesus rises from the dead, an incredible light force comes forth. That same light that spoke in Genesis 1. The same light that Saul of Tarsus encountered on the road to Damascus comes into this tomb and imprints the image of the once dead Jesus onto the Shroud of Turin. And now the shroud is left behind, And the Gospels tell us that when the disciples saw the garments, then they believed. That's our hope for you, that as you see this exhibit today and you learn about the Shroud of Turin and all the story behind it, that you also will believe. So I'm going to pick up what the Bible calls the crown of thorns, what we know is a helmet of thorns. Hopefully I don't puncture myself in the process, but just imagine this going on the head of Jesus and being forced down over his brow. That is very consistent with what we see on the image of the Shroud of Turin. There's not recorded in any other crucifixion, and there were hundreds of thousands of crucifixions over a 600-year period. Not a single one of them mentions a crown of thorns. So the man on the shroud is either Jesus of Nazareth or it's nothing at all. Now, Jesus also is punctured with nails. The nails go in to inflict pain, not necessarily to suspend the body, because they often used ropes to help hold the body on the cross. The message of this is pain. And this is the pain center right here, what we would call destats space through the wrist, or between the radius and ulna. So you're talking about a 1/4 of an inch difference between the radius and ulna, as we see in Yohanan, or between destat space. It clearly would not be in the palm of the hand because the weight of the body would tear through this, as Peter Barbet's experiments showed. Now, the nails are not always the same size. The Romans crucify lots of people. They do it every day. They reuse nails and they reuse wood. But this is sort of the maximum length of what we would see in crucifixion. Sometimes they might even be just half this size as well. So when you think about the nails that nailed Jesus to the cross, they had probably nailed other people to the cross before him, and they probably nailed other people to the cross after him. One of the amazing things in the crucifixion story is that a Roman soldier takes a spear, and you can see a replica of what a first century spearhead would look like, and it's rammed into Jesus on the right side through the 4th and 5th rib. And so just feeling that between my ribs right now, I can only imagine. Of course, this demonstrates that Jesus has already died. And out of his side then flows blood and water. Incidentally, we see that very type of fluid on the Shroud of Turin. It's not just regular blood, but you also have the fluids that flow out of the body when it's pierced in this way. That wound in the side is what he later mentions to Thomas, and when he says, "Here, reach out and see the wound in my side, see the wounds in my hand." The Roman soldiers, of course, are following orders. These are young men working in a quaternion, 4-man teams, and when Jesus looks down at them, he merely says, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they were doing." Such a powerful reminder to us to forgive those who wrong us as well, and that's the power of the gospel that enables us to do that. Now, before the crucifixion itself, when Jesus was still in Pilate's praetorium, he is scourged with a flagrum, and we have two because they were happening simultaneously. One man was on one side with a flagrum, another soldier was on the other side with a flagrum. So the flagrum, with its 3 strands, and sometimes there's more than 3 strands, but weighted with lead, and sometimes people think bone or glass, but there's no evidence of that. We know there were lead, and that's what the markings are of the shroud as well. And so the soldiers, with all of their weight, they are responsible to the exactor mortis, the death master, to inflict as much pain and damage as they can with these strokes. So when the lash comes from one side, as soon as it's lifted from the other side, it's coming as well. So there's no chance to breathe in between. And so this person is literally beaten, and these strands are hitting from the back of the head all the way down the body to the bottom of the feet. He is flayed, and we see this in the Puteoli victim from Puteoli, Italy. The stripes all the way across the entire body, and then the victim is nailed from the outside in. This reminds us of Isaiah 53:5, that he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement that brought our peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. One of the things the Gospels mention is that over the head of Jesus on the cross, which was a T-shaped, a tau-shaped cross, a Latin T-shaped cross, that over his head, nailed to the cross in 3 languages, is a message, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. This is an important reminder to us that Jesus is indeed not only the King of the Jews, but he's the King of all the world. And for every language, every tribe, every person, Jesus Christ shed his blood. When we studied the Shroud of Turin, and with today's AI technology, we may be for the first time ever looking at the face of our Savior. We have a bronze image of Jesus based on the Shroud of Turin. Surprisingly, he was about 5 feet 11 tall, and the average man in Judea at that time was 5'6" or 5'7". Again, something a forger would have never done. 5'11" or so, maybe 175 pounds. He'd run a construction company for a number of years. He's been walking all over creation. Jesus was in vibrant health before the scourging and before the crucifixion. He said, "This is my body which is broken for you," knowing that his body was about to be torn and shredded. When you look at the image of the shroud, notice that the middle of the beard is missing. All the AI images that you'll see as well are missing the middle of the beard. This is consistent with what the Gospels tell us, that they have grabbed him by the beard and they have plucked out part of it. When we see the eyes of Jesus, we're reminded of the images of Segundo Pia from 1898 that appear to show the coins of Pontius Pilate in the eye sockets. When we see his frame, we realize that he has been shredded with over 700 wounds, from the crown of thorns on his brow all the way down to the wounds in his feet, including through the heel bone where you should have the wound here as you see it in the Shroud of Turin. There are wounds on the top of the feet as well, just as there are on the entire body, but the primary heel wounds should be right here through the calcaneus. You'll notice that his knees are torn up from where he's fallen, carrying a 125-pound crossbeam, and he falls under that weight, and this tears up his knees in addition to the nose and his face that hit the ground at this time. Now, the nails are in the right place in the wrist, and notice that the wounds are square wounds. The nails that we showed you earlier were square, which are typical of first-century nails, not round nails like you would have by the medieval period, for example, another sign of the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. And so as we look at the bronze, for the first time, we're able to imagine what Jesus of Nazareth actually looked like. The natural man. He's not only the Son of God, but he's also the Son of Man. He takes on human form. John 1:14 says that he took on flesh and he came and he lived among us. He then died in our place so that we could be restored into right relationship with God the Father. It's our prayer that if you're watching this today and you've not been restored into right relationship with God, that you'll do that today. You'll accept the sacrifice of Jesus. All you have to do is acknowledge your sin and ask him to forgive your sin, to come and to be Lord of your life. And when you do, a miracle will take place and he'll take control of your life. And it's the greatest decision you can ever